parents need to understand that your child has two parents and that both parents are important to your child and that your child comes from both parents. And so parts of each of you are embedded in this child. And when you criticize the other parent, you're really criticizing a portion of a part of your child. And I think children get so upset. Sometimes, people give us tapes, for example, to listen to where they're fighting with their spouse. And they say, this is the best tape, you need to listen to this. And I'm listening to it and I'm hearing in the background this child saying, no, 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 stop. Right. And they don't stop. They're not listening. They're so intent on making their position known that they don't listen. And so I think it's really important that parents learn that really what's in your child's best interest is to foster a relationship with the other parent. What's really in the child's best interest is to make sure that you actually are not disparaging the other parent and that your child is not exposed to the arguing.
Hi, I'm Rachel Green, Brooklyn-based divorce mediator and collaborative attorney, and this is my podcast, Keep the Kids in Mind. Join me as I chat with other industry professionals about everything from smoothly navigating your way through divorce to prenups, all the while keeping the kids in mind. Hello, and welcome to Keep the Kids in Mind. This morning, we have a wonderful guest joining us, and we'll have a chance to learn a whole different aspect of the divorce process. We have Lisa Zeiderman of Miller Zeiderman, who is a very experienced matrimonial attorney who litigates. So Lisa, welcome.
Thank you so much for having me, Rachel. I'm really pleased to be on your show today.
And as you probably know, I work mainly as a mediator and also as a collaborative lawyer. And I don't have a chance that often to speak to litigation attorneys. So it's kind of the side that most of our listeners have heard more about. And certainly it's much more represented on television and film than what I do. But I'm wondering how you became a family law litigator, especially because so many attorneys go through law school and come out saying, I never want to deal with family law. Oh, that's so messy.
So in my particular case, I actually started in the fashion business. And I had my own business by the time I think I was about 21 years old on 7th Avenue. And I was representing many different designers and working with them to market their products. And then I went through my own divorce and my own custody issues with my child, who is now 31 years old. And at that point, decided that matrimonial and divorce law was actually very interesting. I hadn't yet gone to college, believe it or not.
Oh, wow.
But I had decided that I was going to pivot and to have a second career, and that I actually wanted to go to college, law school, and then to become a matrimonial attorney. And so this was really my dream, and to help other people go through the experience that I had had, and to improve upon that experience, frankly.
Yeah. So what went wrong in your divorce, or what worked and what didn't work, I could say?
Well, I think so. I think what I found was so difficult was that when people are under stress, and particularly when there are custodial issues, that they need response time as quickly as possible.
Yeah.
And sometimes it would be days, literally days, many of them, until I would get a response from an attorney.
And so you were trying to do things like, are we going to sign our child up for swimming? And you wouldn't, because you're going through the attorneys, and you've talked to your attorney who talks to his attorney, and then goes back to, that you wouldn't get an answer in time to sign up for swimming.
Correct. Or something as simple as, people have holiday schedules at some point, but sometimes in that intermediate period when they don't have their holiday schedule, well, which parent is going to be with the child for Halloween, or which child is going to have that first night of Hanukkah, or who's having the Passover Seder. And so there would be those types of issues, but there would also be other issues that came up about custody. And my ex-husband at the time was a lawyer. I was not. And right. So I needed the guidance of an attorney, and many times could not reach that attorney. And so that was first and foremost, I thought to myself, many of these issues could be resolved if you just have somebody who is fairly responsive. I mean, I don't expect that somebody can be responsive in a minute, but they should be responsive within 24 hours of the crisis. And so that was very important to me. I would say that the other thing was that I needed to make sure that people were organized who were working with me. And there was just a lack of organization. And, attorneys who couldn't find papers, or attorneys who really didn't know the file, or, all of those kinds of things. And look, I frankly was paying very good money for their services, but I felt like this is not really what they are doing. They just have too much on their plate, and or are just not paying attention, or I'm just some file. And
Yeah,
so from the
it's
very beginning, it was
interesting.
very, very important to
Yeah.
me that we do that. And so I built a business essentially starting approximately 10 years ago. It'll be 10 years in November, where responsiveness was really important, and where we had enough people to service the clients. And I think that it is really about service, and it is really about getting back to them. And it is also about thinking strategically with your client in terms of custody.
So that's so interesting. Congratulations on 10 years, by the way.
Thank you.
That's so interesting because what you're saying strikes me as something, this is one of the reasons mediation has taken off, is because in mediation, we're focused kind of on what the clients, it's a much more client-centered, client-driven process, and we're focused on what the clients need. And I can pretty much always accommodate clients if they had some kind of time-driven emergency. They had to sign up for something, or they had to make a decision about Halloween. It's next week. We could very quickly, especially these days with Zoom, we could have a meeting. But like, you are sitting in your car right now because you are about to go into the court to have a trial. And, my understanding is that the litigation process is not usually able to be that kind of responsive, have that kind of responsiveness, because you're driven by the court and the court's requirements. I mean, does your firm have, people on staff who kind of act like social workers or communication
No,
operators?
we aren't social. We are definitely not social workers, although we refer people to social workers and therapists, etc. But I will say, if you have an emergency, such as Halloween or a vacation, or, for example, there was an issue with alcoholism this week. Okay. And it's not something that necessarily is going to be mediated, right? Or there's an issue with corporal punishment, not something that's going to be mediated. Or if two parties really can't come to the table, I just finished a very big trial, and those two parties could not come to the table.
No.
And it was, frankly, we needed to be in court, and we needed to have the trial, and we did start the trial. And then during my cross-examination of the other side, the other parent, they decided that maybe it was better to settle at that point. And so sometimes things need to be pointed out during a cross-examination, or during an appearance with a judge, so that you could get a judge's view as well. And we have an emergency order to show cause that just went in last night. The client called 2 days before and said that there was an issue, and we now already have an appearance scheduled for Monday. So if there's an emergency, and I understand you can do this in mediation, but frankly, it takes two people to come to the table in mediation.
Yes, absolutely.
And it's not necessarily always the case that two people can come to the table.
No,
And if two people can't, you need a judge.
Yeah, I think that probably our client bases do not intersect much.
Right,
I think the people who choose to come to mediation are people who are not needing the judge to point it out. They can work out a lot themselves. And then I'm just kind of guiding them and helping them to do that. And you're seeing, kind of the opposite end of the spectrum.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, we have the opposite, probably the opposite client. Look, we deal with a lot of review of agreements for mediation, and we do that. And it is not uncommon, if I think that the matter can be resolved by mediation, that I will refer somebody to a mediator. Because if I think that they don't need to be in litigation, I'm not going to take a case to litigate it for the sake of litigating it. They should go into mediation and have that opportunity to work it out. And sometimes they might work out a portion of the case and come back to me to litigate another portion of the case, which just can't be resolved.
Right, which happens with my practice as well. I say, we work out, like, let's say we do work out parenting, And, but then there's very complex money things they can't resolve themselves. So I send them to someone else. Yeah.
Yeah, no. So, I mean, I think when there are issues where people cannot agree, for example, on whether a child should have therapy or whether a child should have a COVID vaccine. I mean, this was probably so many motions during COVID that we made
Wow.
for a child to have COVID vaccine and for
Because
a
one
parent to
parent
have.
wanted, and the other was an anti-vaxxer.
Yes, and
Mhm.
not an anti-vaxxer necessarily,
Yeah.
but anti-COVID vaccinator,
Wow.
right? Vaccine. And so, having to go in with that order to show cause so a child was not exposed to COVID, for example, and, making that order to show cause and giving a parent the right to make the decision to get a child vaccinated. Those are the kind of issues that, unfortunately couldn't be resolved through many letters or phone calls or meetings or parent coordinators even. It
Hmm.
just wasn't possible.
Right. And just for the lay people here, in order to show cause is a request for the judge to jump in and help you resolve one issue. Is that
Well, it
usually?
could be many.
It
It
could be
could be many.
many
So
issues.
in New York, we are required really to move by order to show cause. It's kind of like a motion where we ask for certain relief. It could be a lot of different things, a lot of prongs of relief, and then we put in usually an affidavit, which is a sworn statement by our client as to what the issues are and perhaps how they've tried to resolve it and why they can't be resolved and why the client believes that the prongs requested should be granted, and even an attorney's statement about the law, so that because sometimes there's precedent that you want to show the judge, and then the judge will read the papers and perhaps read an opposition to those papers written by the other side and make a decision. Or if you ask for immediate relief, they will actually give you immediate relief.
Mhm. Oh, okay. And when in your divorce, were you and your ex fighting over your children? You had one child?
I had one child,
You
yes.
had,
So I
and
have one child. So
right.
we fought over that. We fought
Yeah,
over
over the
finances.
schedule and the finances and
Sure.
and
The
and so then, how long did your divorce take?
My
And then
divorce took
when did you go to law school, like, in relative to the whole thing?
so I graduated from law school in 2004, and I would say my divorce started around 1994. It was probably about 2 years. And it went on. We settled custody at some point ourselves, and then we actually had a trial of the financial issues. And those were a little bit more complicated because there was equitable distribution of a law practice that was involved, which
Oh,
was
right,
obviously not mine.
right.
But yes, so there was that too. But
And
you know,
your ex did your ex do matrimonial law?
no,
No.
no, 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 no matrimonial. So this was definitely something new for both of us. And I will say that years later, and this is a little advice to parents, right? Is that years later, what I've learned is that my daughter, who's 31, has a great relationship with both of us. We just had a wedding for her, 2 years
Oh,
ago, and it was
congratulations.
lovely. And
Yeah,
I had my ex-husband at my home for the wedding, and my daughter could not have been happier. And so all of those things, you can put all of those things behind you at some
yeah,
point and move on, which is, and sooner rather than later is a good idea for the sake of your child.
yeah,
Um,
that's great perspective to have to
yeah,
give your clients now.
it
I
is.
I always try to tell my clients to think, you're gonna feel differently about this 5 weeks from now, 5 months from now, and 5 years from now.
Right, you will, and people don't see it when they're in it,
No.
but it's really important. One of the things that people do is they count the hours and the days, and
Yeah.
I was just saying to someone, I don't think that at 31 years old, my daughter even thinks about how many hours did I spend with mom? How many nights did I spend with dad? How did all that work? She thinks about the things that we did together
Mhm.
and the things that each of us did for her and how active we were in her lives and that we both love her. And I think that's so much more important than thinking that each hour and each minute and each day needs to be counted.
Mhm.
It just doesn't need to be. You're going to have a great relationship with your child, even if you have a little less time than the other parent or a little more time than the other parent, because the fact is that your child is not counting the nights.
Well, also, I think there's been a measured benefit. One of the positives that can come out of a divorce is that both parents are paying more attention to the child when they have her, if they have her part time instead of full time. And when they're having her full time, they're turning on the TV to just keep her busy while they're doing other things. So, it can be a benefit. I mean, I think this is a measured benefit that's been proven, that it's one of the good things that comes out of divorce for children is that they have more of their parents' attention when they're with them.
100%. And it's really, I know this is a cliche, it's quality versus quantity, but it really is the truth. It is about the quality of the time that you have and not necessarily the quantity of the time that you have. And I think, what the other thing that I learned, which I think is so important, is that I think what disturbs children the most, and I often represent children actually, as
As
an
an
attorney
attorney
for
for children.
yes, for children. And I think what they find most disturbing is when one parent disparages the other parent,
Mhm.
because this is their parent. And they need to actually, and parents need to understand that your child has two parents and that both parents are important to your child and that your child comes from both parents. And so parts of each of you are embedded in this child. And when you criticize the other parent, you're really criticizing a portion of a part of your child. And I think children get so upset. Sometimes, people give us tapes, for example, to listen to, where they're fighting with their spouse. And they say, this is the best tape, you need to listen to this. And I'm listening to it and I'm hearing in the background this child saying, no, 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 stop. Right.
Oh,
And they don't stop. They're
yeah.
not listening. They're so intent on making their position known that they don't listen. And so I think it's really important that parents learn that really what's in your child's best interest is to foster a relationship with the other parent. What's really in the child's best interest is to make sure that you actually are not disparaging the other parent and that your child is not exposed to the arguing.
Yeah. So those are like the top three that you would top three pieces of advice that you would give people.
I would.
Yeah.
Don't disparage, foster a relationship,
Yeah.
and make sure to put your child's best interests first. Think
Yeah.
about what is important for your child. And keep in mind what your child is also interested in, what your child, when you pick activities that your child is interested in. When, you're picking a camp, pick a camp that your child is interested in going to. Involve your child in some of these decisions too, because
Mhm.
they really actually do have a voice. They may not have a vote at the table, but they do have a voice.
And at what age would you involve your a child to making those decisions or to
I think
having a voice, rather?
Right. So I think it depends on the decision, but I think you could sit down with your child, for example, at 6 or 7 years old and say, here's the choices of extracurricular activities. For example, are you interested in swimming or are you interested in taekwondo? Are you interested in horseback riding or gymnastics? Right. These are questions that you certainly can involve your child in. And if your child is not interested in a particular sport or a particular activity, maybe expose the child to it a little bit, but don't force the child, because we see that so many times where a child actually says, I don't want to do tennis, for example, or I don't want to swim, I hate swimming. There are other activities out there that your child can benefit from, and so don't take this position. Very often this becomes a fight between parents, and it doesn't have to be.
Yeah. So listening to children is very important in this process at all points. It sounds like.
It is
Yeah.
important.
And what would you say are some of the ways our court system is, is doing well, and what are some of the ways that our court system is not doing well for families at this point?
So I think we have phenomenal judges. I really do. I think that the judges are very well versed in the law, and they are listening, and they are hearing the issues, and they are making decisions.
Thoughtful.
And I And I think that they are reading the papers,
Mm-hmm.
and I think that they are giving everybody an opportunity to be heard. I
That's
think that's the very good side of it. And they are trying their very best to move the cases as fast as they possibly can, but understanding there was a backlog from COVID.
right.
And so they are overworked
Yeah.
and to some degree overwhelmed because of that.
Right.
And I think litigants and attorneys need to be conscious of that, that they too are working very, very hard and they can't do any more than there is. There's only 24 hours in that day. And they've got to deal with this triage essentially of emergency situations as well as the cases as they are ongoing. And many of the judges have over 300 cases right now,
Right.
and that is very difficult. So I think that's difficult, but I think, as I said, we have good judges, and we're very fortunate for that. I think on the other side, there is needs to be more judges. And there needs to be more judges who are well versed in family and matrimonial law and who have a passion for that particular area. And putting judges in, for example, that are more interested in commercial litigation or some other form of litigation, it really doesn't do a service to the clients or the litigants, because you need somebody who is interested in that type of
Yeah.
litigation.
Yeah.
Very intense litigation.
Mm-hmm.
And you need judges who are interested. And I think that the court systems need to be better staffed, and there needs to be more of the judges, and the cases need to be heard as a result of that more quickly, right? And so that you can move quickly through the system. I would say that's the biggest complaint,
Yeah.
is that there's just not enough resources right now to do
So
that.
how long is it taking a typical case from, do you mostly work in New York County and Manhattan?
I work mostly in Manhattan and Westchester, and I have cases as well in Rockland and in Kings County and Putnam. So we have a few in Long Island also,
Yeah.
actually.
Greater New York City.
Yes.
And like, how long would you say a typical case, like, let's say somebody came into your office, it's Friday today. So let's say next Monday, somebody comes in for the first time, and they're arguing over custody and they have also financial issues. How long would you, if they say, how long is this going to take? And let's say you're going to end up in court.
It could take a year. It
A
could
year.
take a year. It could take a little bit longer, but certainly could take a year.
Yeah. And most cases don't end up in court, right? I mean, most
I don't
cases
know
end
that
up.
that's true. I think a
Yeah.
lot of cases end up in court, but they don't end up at trial.
Yeah, I
I
see.
think
So
that
they have,
Right. So I think that cases that tend to be complex and need structure end up in court. And I think that cases which can be settled, they get settled very quickly. But I also think that sometimes it is faster and actually less expensive to be in court, because you're moving the case more quickly and you have a structure, and you're not getting those, you're not writing 10 times for the same thing. Because if there's somebody is not giving you discovery, or somebody is not giving you the information, or somebody's not signing the HIPAA form, or whatever it is, you have the avenue of writing to the court or being in court and asking for those things, and then that's going to happen very quickly. And so I do believe that that's incredibly important, actually.
mhm.
I think people fear the court system, and the court system doesn't have to be feared. The judges are there to help you, not to hurt you.
Yeah.
And they're there to actually make the system move faster, to actually help families get through it, and to resolve the issues. And you might not always like the way that they're resolved,
Mhm.
but you're getting a resolution to
You're getting,
and
yeah,
that's important too.
right, right. I guess I've heard stories like, well, this is a friend of mine, but not a professional colleague, but uh, she ended up. I mean, it seems like her lawyer wasn't communicating well with her, and she didn't understand what was going on. And she had been living in the primary residence and had done a lot of renovations over the years to the residence with her own money and her own sweat equity. And she had receipts. She had 3 binders worth of receipts and photographs showing all the work that she did, but she didn't produce it in time. And the judge said, I'm not looking at any of this. And, I mean, the way that my friend tells the story, it sounds as if everybody turned against her because she was sort of like frozen and she just had trouble responding to things in a timely manner. And her attorney was losing patience with her, and the judge definitely lost patience with her. And they ended up with a result that seems really unfair, at least from what I know about it. I guess I'm wondering if you have other cases that kind of, come to you in your sleepless nights where things really didn't work out the way they should have, or cases that worked out really well that you think of in the middle of the night.
So look, here's what I'm going to say is that just like attorneys need to be responsive, clients need to be responsive, because, when an attorney says to you, I need these documents by this deadline, and otherwise the judge is not going to accept them because there are deadlines, then you need to make sure that as a client, you've gotten those documents to your attorney and well in advance of the deadline, so that your attorney has the time to process it, review it, get it to the other side, get it to the court if necessary, whatever it is. The litigants in matrimonial cases in New York are standing in the courtroom, okay, or on virtual, however we're doing it. They're hearing the deadlines. So they are signing pieces of paper which have the deadlines. They are getting from our office, they get emails and notifications as to when the deadlines are and when they must produce the discovery by. And we're very clear and we follow up on it. But if a client, decides, frankly, to bury their head in the sand,
Yeah.
and not to actually produce the documentation, and then comes along at a later date and says, oh, by the way, I have this documentation. Well, that's a problem.
Yeah.
Because the court will not accept it. It is prejudicial to the other side.
Yeah.
So that's the issue that it sounds like. I mean, I don't know your friend's whole story, but it sounds like it may, sometimes people are so stressed out that they just stop essentially listening. It's like when you go to the doctor and you hear bad news and you can't really take it in. That's the problem, right? And so in that particular case, I would say to somebody, you really need to see a therapist, or you need to have someone involved who can help you with this, so that you are not caught in a situation where you are not getting the information quickly.
Right. Yeah, no, I would agree with your assessment of that case. I think that's what happened. I think there was, like she needed emotional help that she didn't get, and her attorney was not as tuned into her, and it was probably like a domino effect of a bunch of different things that just didn't go right.
Yeah, and it does happen. It happens. Look, we don't usually continue representing a client if they continue not to take our advice, or don't produce the responsive documents, because it's not going to end in a good way. And we have a duty to our clients, and we have a duty to the court, and we need to be prepared. And so it's important, and we make this very clear. Clients need to be responsive, and they get plenty of reminders. So it really is something we're very specific about. Deadlines are very important.
Yeah. And you're having a trial today?
I am.
And is it on all issues, or?
It's on custody, actually. I just finished a custody trial. We did very well, so I was very very happy. And we're just in the middle of another. And we have several financial trials coming up as well. So yes, and some complex financial issues as well.
And how old are the children involved in the one you just finished, the one you're about to do?
So the one that I actually just finished, the child was 8, and the one that I'm actually about to do, the child is 12 and 15.
Oh, 12 and 15. And are the parents living separated?
The parents are living together.
Still living together.
Yes.
Wow. And how long has it been since they decided to separate?
It's literally a year.
A year. Yeah.
So we're coming up on the trial.
Right. That's a long time for the kids. So it'll be a relief, I think, for all of them to get it resolved. Yeah.
Absolutely. And, we've had in New York, I don't know if you do this, through in your area, but in New York, we have forensic evaluators who will meet with the family members and who will actually um, evaluate the family and also see the parties with the children and see the parents perhaps even together, and then make some sort of a recommendation, perhaps sometimes they don't make a recommendation to the court as to how they see custody occurring, but their voice also is not determinative. The court is the judge is actually the person who is going to make the best interest determination as to which parent is in the better position to have legal and physical custody.
Mm-hmm. And there was a forensic evaluation in this case.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. So, and
Yeah.
it's important sometimes to have them, particularly if there are mental health issues. We do them less and less in New York,
Yeah.
but it is important sometimes to have them because it does give more information to the court.
Yeah. Oh, and before you were mentioning alcoholism as, an example of a case that wouldn't be mediatable. Certainly drinking, if one parent is abusing substances, they are not going to mediate whether they can abuse substances. I
Yeah.
think that's I think that's a yes, no. That's not a gray area that you can discuss in mediation. I have had parents who are now sober in mediation who, so we talk about like safeguards that the other parent can have to assure that the sobriety continues. And then we have like a contingent schedule for the child, based on the parent maintaining sobriety, because there are people who do recover from addiction. And then they should not be deprived of being parents. But if they are not, if they haven't done step one, admit you have a problem, they cannot mediate, certainly. But then, a forensic evaluation would be very useful.
Yes, and an alcohol evaluation as well. I mean, we have addiction specialists actually who sometimes will do an evaluation for the court or even do an evaluation for the attorneys who are involved. But one of the issues is that you do need to have precautions, and there are such great mechanisms now out there. So, for example, SoberLink. I don't
Yeah.
know if you've ever seen that, but SoberLink is great.
Right.
And there's, the Scram bracelet, and all of those types of things are actually very helpful to making sure that your child is safe. But of
Right.
course, somebody has to actually do those things, right? They have to agree that
Yes.
they're going to use the SoberLink. There's
Yeah.
also an interlock device which you can put on a car
Mark.
so that you're not in a situation where someone is possibly going to drive your child while intoxicated. Also good
Yeah.
protection. So there are different ways to protect your child from this situation.
Yeah. I had a heartbreaking case like that where one of the parents really does have alcohol problem and made a drunk call, and well, I mean, that wasn't a mediation. Actually, it was like a negotiated settlement. And my client, said to me, I have a recording of a, phone call. I want you to listen to it. And I was thinking, what am I listening to it for? I can't evaluate whether someone's drunk. I mean, this parent sounded the way someone on television sounds, like, I want to tell you that like slurred words, and the child was in the car with them.
Oh my God, that
Yeah.
is so sad.
It
Yeah,
was,
that is the biggest concern,
yeah.
or certainly one of the concerns, and of course to all the other people who are on the road, right? So
Right.
it's your child, but it's also all the other people, and perhaps the children who are also, it could be a child's friend who they're
Yeah.
transporting. So it is something to be very conscious about, and I think that sometimes parents are in denial about not only their own alcohol issues, but it could be the other party's alcohol issues. And they
Right.
need to understand that things can happen. And I've had those cases where it's taken a long time for a parent to actually, the non-drinking parent, to admit that the other parent has such an issue because it's just so incomprehensible to them and they just don't want to see it or deal with it. And until unfortunately something happens sometimes, or until it's brought to their attention, they don't do anything about it. And,
Yeah.
there is that idea of derivative neglect, where if you're allowing your child to be exposed to this, you too are neglectful of your child, and you
Yeah.
too could actually risk losing your child.
Right.
And
Yeah.
so it's very important to take action when
Yeah.
that is the situation.
Right. Yeah. No, I've emphasized that to clients as well. that they have the responsibility to protect their child as much as the other parent should be taking responsibility not to be driving drunk.
100%.
Yeah.
100%. It's very important. And unfortunately, we have seen, children who are in accidents because a parent has driven while intoxicated, and that's a very unfortunate situation.
Maybe self-driving cars will
Yeah,
clear
perhaps.
this issue over the next decades or
Perhaps.
whatever.
But in the meantime, that interlock device might work.
Right, I think so.
And Soberlink.
Well, Lisa, it was wonderful to have time to talk to you and hear about your fascinating practice and the insights that you have because of your own lived experience as well as your years of experience as representing people in matrimonial cases. And I really appreciated hearing your perspective on the court system and on the divorce process. And good luck today in your trial. I hope it goes well.
Thank you so much.
And thank you so much for coming on the podcast and helping us all to keep the kids in mind.
Thank you so much for having me.